Hi everyone and welcome to Lipstick on a Rig. Today we're going to be crocheting this very simple Christmas beanie. And if you're interested in my other Christmas crochet tutorials, check the links in the description. And for this project, we're going to be working with size 4 medium weight acrylic yarn. And I'm just working with the Big Twist Value brand, and my colors are Varsity Green, Varsity Red, and White. And I'm also going to be using a size F or 5 or 3.75 millimeter crochet hook. But if you don't have a crochet hook of this exact size, that's fine. Just get as close as you can. And of course, you can use a regular pom-pom, but for this, I'm going to be using a bell or maybe even 2 bells. And I just got these from the thrift store. They were attached to a wreath that I took apart, so you can find these pretty much anywhere, but just make sure that it has a loop so that you can attach it. So we're going to begin by attaching the yarn to our crochet hook using a slip knot. And then we're going to chain 12. And once you have your 12 chains in place, go ahead and turn them over so that you can access this third loop in the back. And this is not a regular part of the V portion of our stitch that we typically work in, but instead it's this back bump back here. And we're going to place one slip stitch in each of our back bumps, going all the way down our row. And that does include this very first back bump in the chain directly beside our crochet hook. So we won't have a turning chain in this row. And at the end of your row, you're going to chain 1 and turn your work. And for this row, we're going to skip our turning chain and we're going to place one slip stitch in the back loop only of each stitch in our row. So at the end of your row, you should have a total of 12 slip stitches in the back loop only. And we're going to repeat that last row until our brim reaches about 18 to 20 inches. And I followed that pattern until I got my brim to about 18 inches, give or take. So I have a couple of things to note. Make sure you've placed your chain stitch at the end of your last row. And also, we're going to make sure that we've ended our last row to where our crochet hook is on the opposite side of the brim of our starting tail. So if you line them up like this, you want your starting tail on one side and your crochet hook on the other. And so now we're going to use slip stitches to join our two short edges. So what we're going to do is we're going to insert our crochet hook in the last stitch from our first row. And you want to make sure that you get your crochet hook under both loops. And then we're going to insert our crochet hook up underneath the last stitch that we just created. And then we're going to yarn over and drop all the loops on our crochet hook for a slip stitch. So now we're just going to repeat that process in these corresponding stitches going up this whole edge here. And once you're done joining your two edges, it should look something like this. So now we're just going to cut and tie off our yarn. So next we're just going to turn our brim inside out so that the pretty side is facing out. And for this next part, you're going to want to grab 3 stitch markers, and I always just use scrap yarn as stitch markers, but you can use whatever you have on hand. And we're going to divide our brim up into 4 equal parts. And for our next part, we are going to be working in the top loop on each of these ridges. So you can see here that you do have several loops to choose from, but we really only want to be working in this top loop. And the reason for that is it does make a sort of cleaner line and a nicer finished project when you're done. So now we're going to attach our red yarn to our crochet hook using a slip knot. And I am going to insert my crochet hook right here in this loop beside my starting and ending tails. And so the pattern for this row is going to be to place 25 single crochets in each of our 4 sections so that we have a total of 100 single crochet stitches. And so we're going to go ahead and place a single crochet where we inserted our crochet hook, but I'm actually going to work over my starting and ending green tails. And you don't have to do this, but it is an option that you have. So if you're going to do that, just drape your tails over your crochet hook and then just work over them. And I'm going to leave my red tail for my next row. So now again, we are going to be working in the top of these ridges. So to get 25 single crochets in this little section, we're probably going to have to place 2 single crochets every once in a while. So if I'm feeling like I want this to be really even, I count the number of ridges that I have, and then I know roughly how many I need to place at the top of each. So I'm going to plan on placing 2 single crochets in roughly every other ridge. And at the end of our row, we're just going to slip stitch into our first single crochet, and then we're going to chain 1. So now we're going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row, and that does include this very first stitch where we placed our slip stitch, and this is just the stitch we're currently in. And don't forget to crochet over your tail if you want to. So we're just going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row, and when we get done, we should have a total of 100 single crochet stitches. And at the end of our row, we're going to skip our slip stitch and our chain 1, and we're going to slip stitch into our first single crochet. And we're going to repeat that last row 5 times so that we have a total of 7 rows of single crochet stitches with our red color of yarn. And when you get done with your 7 rows, it should look something like this. And after you're done joining your 7th row, then you're just going to cut and tie off your yarn. So now we're going to attach the white yarn to our crochet hook using a slip knot. And we're going to insert our crochet hook right here where we just placed our last slip stitch in the top of that first single crochet. And and we're going to yarn over and pull through the stitch, and then yarn over and drop our 2 loops. And from here, we're just going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row. So when we get to the end of our row, we should have a total of 100 single crochet stitches. And at the end of our row, we're going to skip our slip stitch, and we're going to place a slip stitch in the top of our first single crochet. Then we're going to chain 1, and from here we're just going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in each row until we have a total of 7 rows with our white color of yarn. So just the same process that we followed with our red. And once you've crocheted your 7 rows of single crochets with your white yarn, then we're just going to cut and tie off our yarn. And we're going to attach our green yarn to our crochet hook using a slip knot. And since we have 100 single crochets in our last row, we really need to get this down to 99 sort of right at the beginning. So this is going to be a little bit weird, but what we're going to do is insert our crochet hook up underneath our very first stitch, and this is the stitch where we placed our slip stitch in the previous row, and I'm going to drape my white tail over my crochet hook and yarn over and pull up through. Then we're going to insert our crochet hook up underneath our second stitch, drape our tail, and yarn over and pull up through. So now we have 3 loops on our crochet hook, and we're just going to yarn over and drop all 3. And for our next part, I recommend grabbing 3 stitch markers. And the pattern for this row is going to be to place 1 single crochet in our first 31 stitches, and then we're going to single crochet together the 32nd and the 33rd stitch. So go ahead and place 1 single crochet in your next 30 stitches so that you have a total of 31 single crochets. And once you have your 31 single crochets in place, then we're going to single crochet together our 32nd and our 33rd stitch. So to do that, insert your crochet hook up underneath your 32nd stitch and yarn over and pull up through. Then up underneath your 33rd stitch and yarn over and pull up through. And you should have 3 loops on your crochet hook. Now we're just going to yarn over and drop all 3 loops. And before we continue on with our pattern, we're going to place a stitch marker in our previous stitch. So not the stitch where we single crocheted 2 together, but the one directly behind that. And so now we're going to continue on with our pattern. So we're going to place 1 single crochet in our next 31 stitches, and then we're going to single crochet together our 32nd and our 33rd stitch. And when we get to the end of our row, we should have a total of 96 single crochet stitches. And you're going to want to mark the stitch before each of your decreases. And when you get to the end of your row, you should have 3 stitch markers, and you're going to skip your slip stitch, and then you're going to slip stitch into the top of your first single crochet stitch from this row. And the pattern for this row is going to be to chain 1, and we're going to place 1 single crochet in each stitch in our row. And we're going to want to keep the place of our stitch markers, so I'll show you how to do that. So when you get to your stitch markers, you're going to go ahead and remove them, and then you're going to place 1 single crochet in your marked stitch as well as your following stitch, and then you're going to place your stitch marker back in that previous stitch. So now we're just going to continue to place one single crochet in each stitch in our row and moving our stitch markers up to correspond with the stitches in our new row. And at the end of your row, you should still have 96 stitches, and we're going to skip our slip stitch and our chain 1, and we're going to slip stitch into our first single crochet. And for this row, we are going to decrease again. So what we're going to do is we're going to chain 1, and we're going to place one single crochet in each of our stitches until we reach our first stitch marker. And we will be placing a single crochet back in this same stitch where we placed our slip stitch and our chain 1. So go ahead and place one single crochet in each stitch until you reach your stitch marker. And when you reach your stitch marker, go ahead and remove it. And we're going to single crochet together these next 2 stitches. So this should be the stitch that you marked and the following stitch. Then we're going to place a stitch marker in our previous stitch. So not our current stitch, but the one behind it, just like we did before. And we're just going to repeat that pattern going all the way around our row, placing one single crochet in each of the stitches between our stitch markers and then single crocheting together our marked stitch in the following stitch. Then we're going to place our stitch marker in the stitch behind our single crochet 2 together stitch. And if you don't like using stitch markers and you prefer to count, then please check the links in the description because I will have the full written pattern on my blog, and I will link to that blog post in the description for you. And at the end of your row, you should have a total of 93 single crochets. And we're going to skip our slip stitch and our chain 1, and we're going to slip stitch into our first single crochet. And the pattern from here is just going to be to repeat those last 2 rows to build the body of your beanie. And like I said before, I will also include the written instructions if the stitch markers aren't your favorite. And if at any point you have a stitch marker slide out, then just count your total number of stitches and line that up with the written pattern, and you should know where to place your decreasing stitches from there. And we will be alternating our colors every 7 rows. And since we needed to decrease from 100 stitches to 99 initially with our green yarn, I will go ahead and show you how to place your first row with your red color. So go ahead and place your next 4 rows with your green color, and I will meet back up with you there. And once you've placed 7 rows with your green color yarn, go ahead and cut and tie it off. And now we're going to attach the red color yarn to our crochet hook using a slip knot. And we're going to insert our crochet hook in this very first green single crochet stitch. We're going to yarn over and pull up through the stitch, and then yarn over and drop our 2 loops. And so now we're just going to continue to follow our pattern. So we are on a row where we're just placing one single crochet in each stitch in our row. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to continue to follow my pattern going all the way up until the hole at the top is very, very small. And when you get down to where you only have 6 stitches, go ahead and place your row of one single crochet in each stitch. And then we're just going to single crochet 2 stitches together at a time, going all the way around our row. So now you should have 3 single crochets around your top. So we're going to go ahead and cut and tie off our yarn. And to cinch up the very top portion of our Christmas beanie, we're just going to weave this tail in and out of the 3 stitches at the top. And I included my slip stitch, so it ended up being a weave of 4. So now we're going to pull on our tail. And I am going to create a little knot loop right here and just knot the very top of it. And so I'm just going to attach the bell to the top of my beanie, but you can also insert the bell in a faux fur pom-pom, or you can just add a regular yarn pom-pom or a regular faux fur pom-pom. And I will link to those 2 pom-pom tutorials in the description. Please let me know in the comments below if you experienced any issues while you were making this, and I will do my best to help you out. If this video helped you, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel, Lipstick on a Rig. Thank you so much for working with me, and I hope you have a wonderful, awesome day.